Hey guys, John Allen here. Um, this is a continuation of the series I'm doing on the teaching of the Mazzeroth. And if you haven't seen the first one, I believe you can, if you wish, continue from here without having seen it. That one was more of an introduction to the topic that we're covering, giving you an idea of what it is that we're going to be going over. But I would recommend going so you'll catch all of the points that we're really trying to cover here. In the meantime, I would like to kind of go a little more informal with this one. I do have notes that I've made for an outline, just like I do with all of these. But this one in particular, I just want to start out by going straight to Scripture and reading it with you and kind of breaking down what we see in that passage. And the passage that I'm going to look at is going to address something that we were talking about in the last video. I mentioned that the seals or heraldry symbols that were used by these nations that God called the four horns are similar to each other in that they all have a representation of sort of this amalgam of different animal forms and a man being as part of that amalgam. And I indicated that that's where the man of sin revelation or the name comes from, the name of that revelation. And it was actually a dream given to Nebuchadnezzar and then interpreted through many different interpretations that we get from Daniel, all of his prophecies centering around this entire story about the man of sin, how it will be revealed over the ages, and how it will culminate with the return of the Messiah, who will restore Israel and bring about the destruction of that man of sin. Now, the part that I want to actually go into and kind of prove at least is where I'm saying that what they're portraying by their national symbols is actually what we see when we talk about cherubim. Now, cherubim is a word found in the book of Ezekiel. You'll see it as well in Revelation, and it's referring to the four living creatures that are around God's throne. Now, oftentimes you'll see people refer to these as angels. I don't think that there's a real problem with calling them that, although I'm not absolutely entirely sure that that is the right name for them. But what we do have are these very unusual creatures, and I want to go straight to the passage where it describes them so that we can start discussing them right now. So if you have your Bibles, you're welcome to turn with me. I'm going to be reading from Ezekiel 1. The version I've chosen is NIV. That just happens to be one where a lot of the symbolism pops out, and that's the main subject that I teach, so I've stuck with NIV for that reason. So starting with verse 1 of chapter 1, I'm going to start reading. In my 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day, while I was among the exiles by the Kabar River, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, by the Kabar River in the land of the Babylonians. There the hand of the Lord was on him. I looked, and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like four living creatures. In appearance, their form was human, but each of them had four faces and four wings. Their legs were straight, their feet were like those of a calf, and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their four sides, they had human hands. All four of them had faces and wings, and the wings of the one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead. They did not turn as they moved. Their faces looked like this. Each of the four had the face of a human being, and on the right side each had the face of a lion, and on the left the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. Such were the faces. They each had 2 wings spread out upward, each wing touching that of the creature on either side, and they each had 2 other wings covering its body. Each one went straight ahead. Wherever the spirit would go, they would go, without turning as they went. The appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire, or like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures. It was bright, and lightning flashed out of it. The creatures sped back and forth like flashes of lightning. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in one of the 4 directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change directions as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. When the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved, and when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. Wherever the spirit would go, they would go, and the wheels would rise along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When the creatures moved, they also moved. When the creatures stood still, they also stood still. And when the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Spread out above the heads of the living creatures was what looked something like a vault, sparkling like crystal and awesome. Under the vault, their wings were stretched out one toward the other, and each had 2 wings covering its body. When the creatures moved, I heard the sound of their wings, like the roar of rushing waters, like the voice of the Almighty, like the tumult of an army. When they stood still, they lowered their wings. Then there came a voice from above the vault over their heads as they stood with lowered wings. Above the vault over their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli, and high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like glowing metal, as if full of fire, and that from there down he looked like fire, and brilliant lights surrounded him, like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds of a rainy day. So was the radiance around him. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell face down, and I heard the voice of one speaking. That was chapter 1 of Ezekiel. I would venture to guess that this is one of those chapters that a lot of people skip, because unless they're curious about the discussion points that are in it that are commonly brought up by people who do want to venture there, and they're looking it up for themselves, they have no reason to really try to study it, because it doesn't look like something that we can quite possibly understand. But as with all things that God presents, there is a thread of details, or there are threads of details that he hides within the scriptures, so that we can kind of make a continuity argument for the meaning of things. And in the case of Ezekiel, I think we do have that, and that's where I'm going to go. I want to compare it to some other passages. Let's start off, first of all, I want to point out that Ezekiel says he was among the exiles in Babylon. That places this report and prophecy at a very specific point in time, which is after the king of Babylon had come and brought the first horn of judgment against Israel. And here, having no bearing of what's going to happen next, what God's going to do with his people, the prophets started to receive words from the Lord during that time about the restoration of the temple later, about the fact that the Messiah would come, and the fact that he would deal with these four horns and eventually bring his kingdom to earth. Now, he not only mentions that he was in Babylon, but he also mentions the king having been taken into custody to the Babylonians. You know, that's where we go at for the first understanding of what's being described to us here. I find it in Ezekiel 41. This is, read it to you. Ezekiel 41, it's talking about what Ezekiel saw and measured when the Lord took him to a vision of the temple to come in the future. And a lot of people debate the meaning of this temple. They think it's going to be an earthly temple, and I'm not convinced of that. I think that he was actually taken to see the one that's in heaven and not built with human hands. And that when Moses in the wilderness was told to build the tabernacle, he said, build it in the fashion of likeness of what you have seen in heaven. And he was given instructions on how to accomplish that. It was supposed to be a mirror image of the things that were up there, and a crude one, of course, but it was to mimic and reflect what he saw in heaven. So when we're looking at the temple that Ezekiel's measuring, I think he's looking at the real one, the one that's going to descend from heaven at the end of the book of Revelation. At the end of the 1,000-year reign, the New Jerusalem is going to come down out of heaven and be married to the land forever. And that'll be the people being given back to the Lord. She is called the bride, but I digress. I'm going to go back to reading from 41, where he's describing the temple. He says, the main hall, the inner sanctuary, and the portico facing the court, so starting in middle of verse 15, as well as the thresholds and the narrow windows and galleries around the three of them, everything beyond and including the threshold was covered with wood. The floor, the wall, up to the windows were covered. In the space above the outside of the entrance to the inner sanctuary and on the walls at regular intervals, all around the inner and outer sanctuary were carved cherubim and palm trees. Palm trees alternated with cherubim. Each cherub had two faces, the face of a human being toward the palm tree on one side, and the face of a lion toward the palm tree on the other. They were carved all around the whole temple, from the floor to the area above the entrance. Cherubim and palm trees were carved on the wall of the main hall. You see the face of the man and the face of the lion opposite of each other in this particular vision. Not exactly what he sees in the vision that he had, and I believe that there's a reason for that. That's the thing that we're uncovering and what we're going to be studying in this lesson. But I want to point out that the reason that I believe that the lion is the one showing as doing the judging in this picture, and that's what that is. Either the face of the Lord shines upon you, the Son of Man, or his wrath is upon you, and that would be the Lion of Judah. So this is speaking, I believe, of the New Jerusalem and the temple that's in it and what he saw there. But I mentioned that as well in my last video, and I just wanted to make sure that I showed the scriptural reference for it, where, you know, when it comes to the cherubim, you always see this faces opposing one another or back to back with each other and facing in opposite directions. When he saw these four, he saw specific things associated with them that I'd like to unpack. The brazen sea from 1 Kings chapter 7 is an object that was in the temple that Solomon built. He cast two bronze pillars, each 18 cubits high, 12 cubits in circumference. He also made two capitals of cast bronze to set on the tops of the pillars. Each capital was 5 cubits high. A network of interwoven chains adorned the capitals on top of the pillars, 7 for each capital. He made pomegranates in 2 rows, encircling each network to decorate the capitals on top of the pillars. He did the same for each capital. The capitals on top of the pillars in the portico were in the shape of lilies, 4 cubits high. On the capitals of both pillars, above the bowl-shaped part next to the network, were the 200 pomegranates in rows all around. He erected the pillars at the portico of the temple. The pillar to the south he named Jachin, and the one to the north Boaz. The capitals on top were in the shape of lilies, and so the work on the pillars was complete. Then it goes on to say, he made the sea of cast metal, circular in shape, measuring 10 cubits from rim to rim, and 5 cubits high. It took a line of 30 cubits to measure around it. Below the rim, gourds encircled it, 10 to a cubit. The gourds were cast in 2 rows, in one piece with the sea. The sea stood on 12 bowls, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea rested on top of them, and their hindquarters were toward the center. It was a handbreadth in thickness, and its rim was like the rim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It held 2,000 baths. He also made 10 movable stands of bronze. Each was 4 cubits long, 4 wide, and 3 high. This is how the stands were made. They had side panels attached to uprights. On the panels between the uprights were lions, bulls, and cherubim, and on the uprights as well. Above and below the lions and bulls were wreaths of hammered work. Each stand had 4 bronze wheels with bronze axles, and each had a basin resting on 4 supports cast with wreaths on each side. On the inside of the stand there was an opening that had a circular frame 1 cubit deep. This opening was round, and with its basework it measured 1.5 cubits. Around its opening there was engraving. The panels on the stands were square, not round. The 4 wheels were under the panels, and the axles of the wheels were attached to the stand. The diameter of each wheel was 1.5 cubits. The wheels were made like chariot wheels. The axles, rims, spokes, and hubs were all of cast metal. Now, I'm going to stop there. You can go on and read more if you'd like. I stopped at verse 33, and again, that was 1 Kings chapter 7. The reason I brought that up is because I see how it's going to help us to understand what we're reading in Ezekiel 1. Here's the picture. You have Babylon came in judgment and destroyed the temple. And that same temple was the one that I was just describing to you, where the bronze sea, which was a basin made of metal, had been sitting, and it was a representation of the throne of God. And when it was taken along with its stands. You can read that in other places. Frequently, whenever the Bronze Sea was mentioned, if you do a concordant search on it in the Bible, you'll see that along with it, the stands get mentioned. Like it's never the basin itself; it's always the basin with its stands, and that's key and pertinent to the fact that we're being told here that whenever this device that the Ancient of Days was sitting upon moves, that the entire thing moves. It's not just in part. And I picture in my mind, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at here, a diadem of these 4 living creatures with their wings outstretched, touching each other, never changing the direction that they look, but the whole ring lifting up and moving in the direction that the Spirit of the Lord goes. And this is the way that I see him describing. But he also says that the wheels that are next to each one of them, we don't know if they're under them, under and slightly in front of, or to the side, or what. We don't know that. But we do know that there are wheels by them that are described as like a wheel within a wheel. And I do believe that this is a gyroscopic type thing, like we often see in the movies, like the movie Contact. And I think that what it's actually representative of is the armillary. If you don't know what an armillary is, I suggest you go look it up. It's actually an astronomy device that's similar to a sextant, but instead of measuring the stars as they are, it measures the recording of where they should be. Like, it's like your map chart, and one is usually a cycle of the sun and the other of the moon, and together you calculate the times and seasons with that wheel within a wheel device. So the idea that a wheel within a wheel would be used by the one who put the bodies in motion to mark the times and the seasons is highly appropriate, and I do believe that it matches with what was revealed to me about the seven spirits of God. This one is identified as the Ancient of Days, and he is the fourth Spirit of the Lord according to the letters to the churches in Revelation. And on the fourth day was when God put those bodies in the heavens and said they will be for the marking of times and seasons. So I believe that when we're seeing him in this likeness, the fact that you have that device show up in his appearing is understandable. And in his vehicle, if you will, some people, the Jewish tradition, this is called the Merkabah. I don't wish you to go out and look up the word Merkabah and get into the long rabbit trails that are out there that are surrounding that subject, because some of that comes from Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah, which is nothing more than witchcraft. And you can easily be led astray. Make sure that what you're learning about this is straight from the Bible, and that God confirms it by his Holy Spirit. In the study of this, I see that, a name for it is useful, so we will call it the Merkabah. And what we saw in the Old Testament temple that got destroyed seems to describe an earthly symbol, like I was talking about, of this heavenly object which Ezekiel was seeing on that day. And I believe that what God was doing was saying, yes, the earthly one has been removed, but now I'm going to show up with my heavenly one, and I am going to engage Israel and her enemies on behalf of the covenant. When he gave the message to Zechariah, which was around the same time, all of these prophets were right around the same time. You look up the minor prophets and you see that all of them were receiving their words around the time of the exile. And they were about the rebuilding of the temple. When Zechariah received it, that's what I was talking about in the last video. He saw the four horns that were going to come up against Israel. And he was also told that the four horsemen, or the craftsmen of the Lord, would show up at those different times and deal with these horns. And I don't want to recap everything from before, but I point it out because it gives context to what I'm saying here. So here we have these angelic beings, living creatures, cherubim, who have these four different faces. Is there a reason for the faces? I believe so. I believe that Israel thinks so too, and that they know, at least in part, the stuff that we're going to go into. And I think that you can unpack most of it by just looking in Numbers 2, where Moses is instructed to lay out the tribes of Israel in a very particular way. And here's what he was told. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, the Israelites are to camp around the tent of meeting some distance from it, each of them under their standard and holding the banners of their family. On the east, toward the sunrise, the divisions of the camp of Judah are to encamp under their standard. The leader of the people of Judah is Nahshon, son of Amminadab. His division numbers 74,600. The tribe of Issachar will camp next to him. The leader of the people of Issachar is Nathanael, son of Zuar. His division numbers 54,400. The tribe of Zebulun will be next. The leader of the people of Zebulun is Eliab, son of Helon. His division numbers 57,400. All the men assigned to the camp of Judah, according to their divisions, number 186,400. They will be set out first. So to the east, you have three different tribes, and he names them separately and their numbers, but then names them all together with the total. He does this in all four directions. And this brings us to a picture that is still remembered today by Israel when they refer to their camps around the tabernacle in the wilderness. There is an outline that shows the banners, and these banners have the animal symbols, which are representative of the cherubim, and what we see when the cherubs appear before Ezekiel here and in their directions. That's a lot, and I think I'm going to stop there. Next time, I hope to go into where did God get the idea, or where did Israel get the idea of assigning the tribes to these animal forms, and what does that all mean? But until then, I hope that this helps and gets you even more curious about this profound mystery about God's judgment and his mercy and all of that, and how it's going to be expressed in this centuries-long story that he's telling us. God bless you.